Early Church view of law given Moses. Proof of Paul's relative unimportance and lack of influence in the leading centers of the Church is the early Church's view of the law given Moses, including whether to observe the Sabbath. Paul in Galatians chapter 4 railed at the foolish Galatians for observing Jewish Sabbaths, new moons, etc. There was no Roman Catholic Church until the 300s, so these early fathers are simply the voices of orthodoxy in the earliest Church. Clement of Rome, 70 AD. In his letters to the Corinthians, part of the early New Testament canon, Clement's first epistle affirms in chapter 1, verse 5 that the Christian community initially walked according to the laws of God, but recently walked, not, according to the rule of God's commandments, chapter 2 verse 4. The same work references the sacrifices still ongoing at Jerusalem, and exhorts to continue the offerings and sacrifices required by the law. Chapter 17 verses 14 to 2. This places it as written no later than 70 AD when the temple at Jerusalem was destroyed. See our article Clement's letters to the Corinthians. Justin Martyr was born 100 died 165 AD. Justin referenced Matthew chapter 5, verse 20 when Jesus says we must live a more righteous life than the Pharisees to enter heaven. This followed Jesus teaching the law would not pass away until heaven and earth would pass away, and that those who teach against the law's continuity are least, but those who teach its continuity are the greatest. Matt 5:17-19. Justin then comments what 5:20 means in that context. In the dialogue of Justin, it says this meant Jesus intended our behavior must surpass the Pharisees' way of living, and if we did not, we might not be sure we could be saved. In context, Jesus portrayed the Pharisees as lawless, teaching tithing, but nothing else from the law. Matt 23:23. Hence, Justin was saying that Jesus in 5:20 said one had to live a better life than the generally lawless Pharisees. Irenaeus, born 130 AD died 02 AD, of Lyon, France gave the early judgment on the law's continuity among Christians at total odds with Paul. The Decalogue, 10 Commandments, however was not cancelled by Christ, but is always in force. Men were never released from its commandments. See, Against Heresies, Ante-Nicene Fathers, Book 4, Chapter 16, at 480 this was actually a heading. In the text, Irenaeus explains, preparing man for this life, the Lord himself did speak in his own person to all alike the words of the Decalogue, and therefore, in like manner, do they remain permanently with us, receiving by means of his advent in the flesh, extension and increase, but not abrogation. Book 4 ch.16.4. Irenaeus similarly said in the same context, the commands of the Old Covenant, as epitomized in the Decalogue, since they were functional before Moses, AH 4.15.1, 4.16.3. The law remains authoritative in the New Covenant. AH 4.16.1, Christ does not contradict the 10 words. He fulfills and expands them, AH 4.13.1. See Ligon Duncan, Irenaeus of Lyons, a true radical Orthodox theologian, Reformation 21, 2006, at http://www.reformation21.com. In Irenaeus' attack on the heretic Mark Ion, he cited Matthew 5 verse 20 to prove Jesus had every intention the law must continue. This passage proved that Mark Ion committed a heresy by teaching that the gospel was, in opposition to an overturning of the law of the past. Irenaeus Against Heresies Bank 4. In other words, we must exceed the obedience to the law which the Pharisees failed to follow, as Jesus depicted them as largely lawless except for tithing. See the Ikatina for Matthew 5 verse 20 at www.earlychristianwritings.com. Didaschalia Apostolorum was written in early 200s. This work reflected orthodoxy of that period, and says one of the 4 identifying marks of heretics is they taught against employing Torah and prophets. One scholar, Oscar Scarson, in Heresy in the Pastoral Epistles, Themelios 20.1, October 1994 9-14 at 10 notes that, quote, a passage in the Syrian Didaschalia Apostolorum, from the 200s, defining heresy. The heretics all had one law, that they should not employ the Torah and the prophets, and that they should blaspheme God Almighty, and should not believe in the resurrection. The site for this 5 Didask. 23, 6:10, quoted according to R. Hugh Connolly, Didaschalia Apostolorum, Oxford, 1929, equals 1969, at 202. Clement of Alexandria from around 200s in work entitled Exhortation to the Heathen taught as a principle they should listen to the Hebrew prophets, of which he cited Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea and Moses, as a means to know the road to salvation, echoing Christ's words to the rich young ruler. Quote, it is now time, as we have dispatched in order the other points, to go to the prophetic scriptures, for the oracles present us with the appliances necessary for the attainment of piety, and so establish the truth. The divine scriptures and institutions of wisdom form the short road to salvation. Devoid of embellishment, of outward beauty of diction, of wordiness and seductiveness, they raise up humanity strangled by wickedness, teaching men to despise the casualties of life, and with one and the same voice remedying many evils, they at once dissuade us from pernicious deceit, and clearly exhort us to the attainment of the salvation set before us. End of quote. The source is Clement of Alexandria. The true doctrine is to be sought in the prophets, chapter 8.